Hey guys, I'm Maren and today I am doing a Party Princess Q&A session on all the questions that I've gotten about my time working as a party princess. So y'all submitted questions on Instagram and I am going to answer them today. So I'll start with, I've got them on my phone here. Number one is, how did you get started? Which is a fun time because I've loved princesses my entire life and I've always been into Disney. So starting this was it felt very natural to me, but basically how it started was a friend and I were in a youth group together and we were raising money to go on a mission trip to Costa Rica. And one day we had to come up with we had an auction where we all had to come up with different services to auction off to raise money for this trip, and we were thinking about it and other kids were doing lawn mowing and babysitting and stuff, but we just the idea kind of hit us, and we had heard about other people doing this sort of thing, and this is back in 2013 when I was about 15 years old. So we had heard about people doing this sort of thing and we thought, you know what, we should just try it, do the one party, and we didn't really expect much more to come of it, but we did the one party. Someone bought it at our auction and we did the one party and everything just took off from there. This was before Frozen even came out, but later that year, after we opened, Frozen came out and that really helped boost us business wise. But we started off with that and word of mouth spread. We decided to make a Facebook page and a website, and it just kind of took off. So we didn't really expect it to have the outcome that it did, but it continued on. So I did, as we call princess, verb, I princessed from June of 2013 through October of 2017. So a little over 4 years. I don't do it anymore, which will lead me to my next question. 2, why did you stop? And would you start up again? So I stopped because I had a horrible case of mono. What we found out was chronic mono during fall of my sophomore year of college, and I ended up having to go on medical leave for that. And I had every intention of still continuing my business and still doing parties and sending performers out to do parties even if I couldn't do them myself. But as I was on medical leave, I kind of had a change of heart where I just felt it just felt like it was time to move on. And it was really surreal because I had always been so into it and loved it so much, but something just hit me during that fall where I was on medical leave, or something just told me it's time to move on and time to do something different. So that's what I did, and it was bittersweet, but that's why I stopped. It just felt like the right time with my health. I kind of realized that as I was having to prioritize things in order to feel better, this was going to be towards the end and it was going to be at the bottom of the list. So what I did was I just knew there were other things that I wanted to do. I always loved writing and I've always loved film and acting, so those are other things that I've wanted to pursue that I wouldn't have had time to pursue if I had kept on doing this. So that's why I quit. It was very bittersweet. My first party that I ever did was as Ariel. My very first one was as Ariel, and oddly enough, the very last event that I did, I remember my first event was a birthday party as Ariel, and then my final one was an event at the North Carolina Zoo, and that was also as Ariel. And I remember thinking, it's just full circle it began and ended with Ariel, and it's kind of bittersweet, but she'll always hold a special place in my heart because of that. Would you start up again? The second part of the question. So I not only performed in my company, but I ran the company as well. So during the week I was managing website, Facebook, Instagram, client communication, everything on that end, the business stuff, and then performing on the weekends. So I loved the business aspect of it just as much as I did the performing, but it was a lot of work just to maintain over those years and paying employees and all of that stuff. And while I really enjoyed it, I think if I ever went back and did it, I would just want to perform. I don't think I would want to actually own the business again. There's such an emotional investment when you're the owner and there's so much time involved. And while it was totally worth it at the time I was doing it, I don't know that I would do it again. I definitely perform on the weekends, do the parties and be done, but it's such a, you're so much more invested when it's a company and you're the one registering the company name for like taxes and stuff. So it's a totally different ball game. But I wouldn't mind performing in the future. I don't know if an opportunity is gonna arise where I'm gonna do that, and there's a lot of other stuff I want to do too, but I wouldn't say it's totally out of the question. It's not totally out of the question. Another question that I get asked all the time when I tell people that I did this is, who did you play? So I pretty much played everyone. So I played mostly Cinderella, Ariel, Elsa, sometimes Anna, Rapunzel, but I also played Belle, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White. I even played Wendy a few times from Peter Pan. We had some requests for her, so I also played Wendy, which was a lot of fun because she is a personal fave of mine. But I pretty much played everyone. Yeah, so it was nice because I wasn't stuck to just one. I got to kind of, it was always fun to see if a parent was booking who they wanted. We had so many Frozen parties when I did this. I definitely played Elsa most of all, but I loved seeing like if someone requested Sleeping Beauty or Snow White or one of the more classic ones, because I love those girls. So that was always fun when I knew, okay, I'd get to do like a Snow White party this weekend or a Sleeping Beauty party this weekend. That was a lot of fun. What was your favorite dress? So my favorite dress, hands down, is probably Cinderella. She's always been one of my favorites, but that dress is just the epitome of everything princessy. You've got the hoop skirt, the blue fabric, the silver shimmers, like it's so fun. So many fun accessories. I loved her wig too. So that was probably my favorite dress. You know, the others, some like Anna had like the vest and the skirt and the blouse. It wasn't his ball gown, but Cinderella, it was always fun to put on that dress and put on the glass slipper shoes and the tights and everything, and you really had like the transformation moment. So that was always very, very exciting to get to try that dress on. And the next question, getting dressed. People always ask, what was it like to go through this process and get ready? So I'll kind of lead you through what it was like to get dressed. So first I would do my makeup according to whatever character. We had charts to follow for every character. When I ran my company, I was very big on modeling the Disney parks and their accuracy and wanting to match up with the characters there, because if a kid came and saw us at their party or at a friend's party and they had gone to Disney World, we wanted it to be believable. So everything that we wanted to make sure that everything was very much in line with the face characters you see at Disney. So the makeup we copied was off of that. We used the same shades they used. We used Ben Nye, which that was the makeup brand that we used. I used my own foundation and such, but I used Ben Nye eyeshadows, lipsticks, blush. So I would do all of that. I always false lashes, and the makeup is not like your everyday makeup. You take it on. Talk about cake face. You take it on, because when you're standing outside or you're in photos and you've got this big wig and this dress competing with your skin tone and your face, you have to kind of play everything up to get that larger than life cartoon appearance. So you take the blush on, you put the lipstick on, eyeshadow and lashes are overdone, and you look kind of crazy, but then you put on your wig cap and your wig and it evens up. So after makeup and wig, I would put on tights and my character shoes. For each character, we had different shoe bows that would go on the shoes. So for Sleeping Beauty, it might be like a pink bow, or for Ariel, it might be like a little seashell charm. So I'd put those on after my tights. I'd put on bloomers, like the little white frilly like legging type things. I put those on. Then if the princess had a hoop skirt, I'd put the hoop skirt on, put a petticoat over that. If she didn't have a hoop skirt like Ariel, I just did a petticoat. Then you put on the actual skirt, and then you put on the top. All of the princess costumes were in two separate pieces. So like Cinderella was just the skirt and the top. It wasn't one piece because we had to have these dresses fit multiple performers. So the skirts had different notches that you could move for your waist size, and then the tops all had corset backs. So everything was laced up. So once I had the skirt on, I'd put the top on, And always a strapless bra. Always. Sometimes not even a bra. If you're wearing a corset, it's like too much. If you have all of this like boning and stuff being laced up, you don't want to crush your organs. So sometimes if it was like a true corset top, we would not wear a bra. So we would lace that up, which is can be kind of painful when you're wearing a corset for a long day. It can be very, very painful. But of course there's something very elegant about being nipped and tucked in, and that really makes you feel lifted and elegant and historically accurate, I might add. So you do that. Then you do gloves, accessories, whatever accessories happen after that. And then you're pretty much ready to go. So it's a lot of pieces. It can get very hot because of all the layers. But yeah. Next question. How heavy are the wigs? This was totally dependent on character. I had wigs that were very light and comfortable to wear. Some of those were Ariel and Sleeping Beauty. Those had very loose curls. The wig caps were very roomy. I always liked wearing those just because they were elegant. But I remember Cinderella and Belle were very top heavy. Cinderella's got that bun and Belle's got the bun and all the curls. So the bun was pulling it back. So those two were pretty heavy. And tight on the head. So you really had to braid your hair close to your head before you put your wig cap on. But the heaviest of all the wigs was, you can guess, Rapunzel. Now this wig, I love Rapunzel and I enjoyed playing Rapunzel, but I hated this wig. Beautiful wig, but I hated wearing it. It came in two parts. We had a base wig that was the bangs, the braids that went around in the back, and then a braid that snapped into the back and went around your side. Now you took the braid and snapped that onto buttons we had on the dress. Now the reason we did this was to stabilize your shoulder. If you had a loose braid, it was easy to it would drag your neck down and hurt your neck. So pinning the braid into the back, it snapped into the bottom of the wig and then snapped onto the side of the costume. Ooh, the lights just went out. So it was too much strain on the neck to have the braid just hanging there. So we added buttons that the back of the braid would pin onto. The back of the braid had like a silk cushion, and that had buttons that snapped onto the dress. And this is something they do at Disney World to make sure that the performer's neck isn't being strained, and that's part of why it's good that it came in two parts, so that your head's not being pulled back by this braid. You kind of can like balance it more. And that wig went down all the way to the floor. It braided about to like your thigh, and then it was just like loose hair. And it had the flowers in it, and on top of that we also had the crown that Flynn Rider steals, and that crown was quite heavy. So that was by far the heaviest wig. Taking it off was always a relief. Kids loved it, which was awesome. Kids, you know, there was no doubt that they thought, oh yeah, that's Rapunzel's hair, but it was a tough time to wear that wig. So kind of going into the party routines, someone asked, what's the typical schedule for this? So I only did parties on weekends mostly. Sometimes I had weeknight events. If we did like community events or like a gig for like a company, we would sometimes do that on weeknights. But I did have parties on Friday nights, and then I also did parties on Saturdays and Sundays. So it was just about every weekend. Some weekends I didn't do any and would send performers out. Sometimes we just may not have had any booked. But some weekends did anywhere from most weekends I did anywhere from 2 to 5 parties around in there. That was typically the average. Typically what averaged out was I would end up doing 2 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, and maybe have performers out doing some as well. So that was the typical schedule. So I did this throughout high school and some of college. So of course time management to do everything else I was doing, but also do parties and go out on the weekends and do that. So it was quite a busy time. No, someone in my dorm is throwing, I don't even know. They might as well have an elephant upstairs. So that was the typical schedule, was Friday through Sunday, sometimes weeknight events. In the summertime when I wasn't in school, I would sometimes do appearances at daycares in the mornings for summer camps and stuff, so that was a lot of fun. I remember one time in high school, spring semester of my senior year, I was so done, such senioritis, and I remember a daycare contacted me and wanted me to come do a 2-hour appearance at their daycare from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And I had class at that time, but I was in senioritis mode, and realized I could get paid more and have a more exciting time being Elsa at this daycare than going to biology. So what did I do? I skipped class and did the event and came into class with like glitter on my cheeks, and I'd tried to take off some of the makeup and everyone was like, where were you? And I was like, I was at the dentist. They just happened to put glitter on my face. Yeah, so that's a typical schedule. The typical party routine. So what would happen is, this is how our parties would go down. You could have anywhere from like 5 kids to like 20. Never knew. I mean, they wrote on the contract. Parents wrote down how many kids you could expect, but then when you got there, there might be more, there might be fewer, but we'd typically go in. But before we went in, we always were in the car. We would call the parent and say, we're outside and we'll be up in about 2 or 3 minutes. We'd say, this is Ariel or this is Bella, and we'll be up in 2 or 3 minutes. We'd call them on our cell phone. And it was always an interesting time because if we were parked near the party, kids would be getting out of the cars, going in with their parents. And we never wanted the kids to see us in a car because we didn't want to ruin the magic. So literally so many times before parties, we'd be like in the car, like hiding, putting sun shields up so the kids couldn't see us. So the kids never questioned, oh, well, why were you in a car and not a carriage? So we went to great lengths to make sure no one saw us get in or out of a car. So we would always like pull the seats down and lie back or like hide our faces. It was quite a time. But a typical party, you'd first go up to the door and ring the doorbell if it's at a house, and this is always my favorite part. The little girl would answer it and she'd typically be dressed in a dress to match yours. I remember so many parties, if I was like Cinderella or Ariel, the little girl would answer wearing a dress exactly like that. So that was so sweet. Their face just lit up. Typically it was a surprise, so that was so much fun to be able to see them so excited and just believing in it. That was by far the most rewarding part. They just run up and hug you, and it's so sweet. It was by far the most rewarding thing, and everyone's just so excited to see their favorite princess. So that was so much fun. So after that, and after these sort of like initial hugs and introductions and wishing the birthday girl a happy birthday, we would do story time. And this would be an interactive story time where we had a book, but we also would like to do a lot of things to involve the kids. Like we might tell them to, if we were reading the Frozen book, we might say, okay, every time you hear Olaf's name, say, I love warm hugs, or something along those lines, just to like keep them interactive. And that was a lot of fun. So I can, to this day, I think I could probably still tell you the Frozen story verbatim. Like off the top of my head, I could probably do it now. It's so ingrained. On the edge of a fjord, a deep mountain lake ringed by majestic peaks was the kingdom of Arendelle. There's more where that came from. And then after story time, we would typically transition into dance time. We had a special speaker, and we had different Frozen dances choreographed, or like princess ball dances that we choreographed and would lead the kids through. So we would do that. And then we transition into makeup. For the little girls, we did eyeshadow and lip gloss. And sometimes we would do tattoos if we had time. And after that, we'd always sign autographs for all the kids, take pictures, help sing happy birthday, and then typically say goodbyes after that and head on back to our carriage, which was awaiting us down the street. So, next question. What kind of stuff did kids ask you? This is probably by far the most entertaining part of the job because kids have no filter. None. They have no filter. So I was asked a ton of crazy questions. I remember one time I was Sleeping Beauty and a little girl came up and said, Sleeping Beauty, do you and Prince Philip take showers together? This kid was 4. Like, she had to have been 3 or 4. She was young. I was Belle one time and a kid came up and asked me, Belle, do you and the Beast sleep in the same bed? So just so many random questions. Kids would literally pull up their dress and say, hey, Elsa, you're in the underwear. And you just have to be like, oh, that's amazing. That's so wonderful. So it's just crazy things. Asking about characters. I remember one time I did an event at my college during the 2016 election season, right around Halloween before the election that November. And I remember somebody, I forget what they were for, but they had a camera. And I was Cinderella doing meet and greets with the kids, and they came up to me and said, Cinderella, who are you voting for in the election? And I, you know, totally stayed in character. I never liked to play dumb, or well, I kind of did play dumb. I never really fed into like modern day things. Cinderella wouldn't know about that. She wouldn't know about the election here. She wouldn't know what cards were because she doesn't have those in her kingdom. So they said, Cinderella, who are you voting for? And I said something along the lines of, oh, well, we don't have that, and we don't have presidents in my kingdom. We have kings and princes. And I said, I'm not sure. So I just totally stayed in character. I think they were wanting to kind of get a rise out of me and see what they could have Cinderella saying she was voting for a certain person, but I stayed totally in character. And a lot of parents would ask us stuff too, but even around parents, we wanted to stay in character. So I remember parents would come up to me as Elsa and say like, oh, so how old are you? And Elsa's 21. So I would say, oh, I'm 21 years old. Or they say, you know, what's your job? Like, or what do you do outside of this? And I said, well, I'm the Queen of Arendelle. Because the kids are listening, and we never wanted to ruin the magic for the kids. Even if it meant sounding totally crazy and in character to parents, we totally, we kept up with it. And I remember they'd say, oh, you know, where do you go to school? And I said, well, I'm a queen. I don't go to school right now. I'm from Arendelle. So just that sort of thing. We never broke character because we wanted to keep the magic alive. So parents would ask weird questions too. And it's like their kids were right there, so it's kind of like, why are you trying to ruin the magic when your kid's right there? And kids hear everything. So that's why we were so big on keeping everything seamless, because they hear everything. I think sometimes people underestimate kids and think, oh, they're not going to hear that, but they do. They hear everything. So we made sure to keep everything up to snuff. How much did you get paid? So typically I don't, when people ask that, it's kind of awkward because I get awkward talking about money, and it varied from party to party, but I'd be like totally like transparent here. Typically I would get paid around $70 to $100 per party, depending on the package they got, how long we were staying, because what a lot of people don't understand is that although we had higher package pricing on our site, not all of that money goes directly to the owners. You know, that goes to cleaning costumes or buying makeup or party supplies. So not all of it just goes into our pocket. Only some of that actually goes to us, and a lot of it goes to paying website fees or, you know, what have you, like the other things that I mentioned. So, but that was typically around in the ballpark of what I got. Sometimes parents would be very generous and tip you, which was always, we were always very grateful for. We never expected a tip, but if the parents felt so inclined, we were very grateful for it. I know it was always a very, you know, not to sound greedy, but it was a very nice moment if after a party the parents decided to tip us. We really appreciated it, especially as college kids, high school students. It's something that we really thank them for. Favorite part of the job. My favorite part of the job was by far getting to see these kids just believe in the magic and get so excited. I used to be the same way. When I was little, Snow White was my favorite princess, and I met her on the Disney cruise for my 4th birthday, and I remember being so enthralled. I was starstruck and could hardly move, and I remember that moment and thinking, oh my gosh, that's Snow White. So being able to be on the other side of it and see these kids be so starstruck was such an amazing thing. And I think this world nowadays tries to make kids grow up so quickly, and to be able to see, even just for an hour, see these kids just enjoy this and believe in this magic was such a wonderful thing, and by far the most rewarding part. When you walk into a party and the little girl's wearing the same dress as you and she runs up and hugs you, it's the sweetest thing ever. And I remember one time I was Cinderella, and a little girl came up and she hugged me and just was the sweetest thing, and she said, I want to be like you when I grow up. And it's just so pure and innocent. Those are just the most wonderful moments and such wonderful memories, and I would not trade that for anything. Okay, least favorite part of the job. There were definitely some parts that were more difficult than others. A lot of times people would say, oh, you're just twirling around, you just get to play with kids and dress up, but it's so much more than dress up. So I would say the hardest part of the job is just constantly being on. It was long days, a lot of driving, a lot of changing in the back of cars, from Ariel to Cinderella to Rapunzel. One time I had 4 parties in a day. I started off as Rapunzel, switched to Cinderella, switched back to Rapunzel, then had to change into Ariel. And in between Cinderella and that next Rapunzel, I had not had enough to eat that day. I had been driving around, changing in back seats, and I remember I laced up my Rapunzel corset, and as I was changing from Cinderella to Rapunzel, I started feeling incredibly nauseous, and I was like, oh my god, like, something bad is about to happen. It's about to happen. So I got out of the car, literally 5 minutes from going into the party, and I threw up in the parking lot of a church. And as I did this, my concern wasn't about, oh my god, I feel nauseous. It was, am I going to get throw up on the braid? Am I going to get the dress dirty? So I would say, going off of that, definitely you're sacrificing your well-being for someone else's entertainment, and it can be very tough. I remember I did a whole day in Raleigh of fairy tale balls. It was ticketed events. We had 3 sessions. They were all 3 hours, and it was a lot of fun, but it was tough because I was in heels all day. I had to get up at 5 a.m. to go to Raleigh for this event. I had to drive back at night. I was wearing a corset all day, makeup all day, smiling. It can really take a toll on your energy, and it takes a lot of stamina. Even though you aren't running around, it still takes a lot just to be able to do that and stay on and stay smiling, because even if you're not meeting a kid at the moment, someone's still watching you. So you don't ever want to have resting bitch face like I sometimes have. You want to still look princess, you still want to have a pleasant exposition. So, you know, that's probably the hardest part, especially in summertime. We did parties outside sometimes. It was incredibly hot. You've got all these layers on, but you have to stick through it because that's what you're being paid to do. And I think that's part of the entertainment industry as a whole. Sometimes it can be very rough. I've done parties with fevers. I have done parties coming off of stomach bugs. It's been pretty much everything, and you don't want to cancel a party if you don't have to, because this is their one party a year, and if they're expecting, you know, Belle at their party, you want Belle to show up at their one party. So I never tried to cancel parties if I could help it. Sometimes I'd have to call in another performer. Sometimes I would have to cancel parties if I was just too sick and we couldn't get anyone in, and that was by far the hardest part too, was calling a parent and saying, I'm so sorry, but Elsa can't come to your party tomorrow. And just, those were the worst phone calls to make. I dreaded making those phone calls, but as a business owner, that was something I had to do. I couldn't just tell my boss, oh, I can't work tomorrow. I had to pay the price, so to speak. So long days, sometimes you have to tell people what they don't want to hear, and I would say that's probably it. Favorite princess to play? Cinderella has always been a personal favorite of mine. Growing up, into my middle school and high school years, even in college, she's still a favorite. So I always loved playing her because she's just the epitome of everything princessy, and I love her story, and it's just a classic. No one gets sick of that. But I also loved playing Ariel just because I loved her story. I love getting to play her. She has such an outgoing, bubbly, no pun intended, nature, and it was always fun to play her. I remember one time I got to do one event as her, and the tail and seashell top, and that was so fun just to be able to like have that moment, and the kids were so enthralled with the tail, and just I love playing Ariel and getting to talk about making up stories about like the ocean world and the human world and Flounder and Sebastian and all these guys. So that was a lot of fun. But I think there's really no character that I detested playing. I definitely had my favorites over others. Like Rapunzel, I liked playing her. She wasn't my favorite to play. I enjoyed playing her, but you know, I enjoyed playing all of them from time to time. Next question, and the last question. Any tips for someone who wants to be a party princess? So I would say, I think there's a lot of inclinations when people say they want to do this. When people say that they want to do this, they think they're going to start up their own company. And if you want to do that, that's great, but know that it's going to be a lot of grunt work. It's going to take a lot of dedication. a lot of time management to do so. And know that if you're going to start a company, the market is incredibly oversaturated right now with a lot of companies undercutting prices. That was one thing that was really tough on my business partner and me when we were about around the time, like the last year that I did it. So many companies had popped up of girls wearing Party City dresses and crappy wigs and just showing up and standing around at a party, who were charging, you know, $20 an hour. And we didn't charge $20 an hour, but we also knew we were providing costumes made from people who worked in the costume department at Disney World, wigs from people who worked in cosmetology at Disney World, and we were creating an experience. We weren't just standing around. So our prices reflected that compared to the others. So if you're going to do this, please do it the right way. Please price yourself adequately, because it does hurt the companies that are trying to give it their all. So if that's what you're doing business-wise, do that. Do it the right way. Register, pay your taxes, because that is going to come back to haunt you down the road if you don't. And know that it's going to take a lot of grunt work, and that it's not always going to be the fun moments. There are going to be a lot of tough moments and a lot of business calls that you're going to have to make to be able to determine how you want to best function. And if you just want to work for a company, I would say look up the companies in your area. Find companies that you admire, ones that you think might carry out the princess vision, I would call it the best way. Try to work for a reputable company that's going to compensate you appropriately, because it is tough work. And if a company is going to try to pay you very little, don't work for them. I know it's not all about the money, but you do want to be able to compensate yourself for it. So I would say if you're applying, email them, send them your resume. We were always so happy to find girls who would email us and wanted to join, and especially when you get like a good resume and a good headshot, so much fun. Typically the process for hiring was my business partner and I would hold interviews with the girls. We would have them do kind of like improv, because so much of this job is based on improv. We would have them like pose as a princess, and we would ask them kids that we got asked at parties. We would ask them questions that we got asked at parties and see how they responded. We might say, okay, be Belle, we're going to ask you a few questions. And then if we liked that, we would typically fit them in a wig, see how it looked, try them out in the dresses, and see how it all came together. And if we liked what we saw, then we typically brought them onto our team. So I would say go into it with a good attitude and a positive attitude. It's okay if you don't have a ton of acting experience or singing experience or performance experience. One of our best girls didn't have much experience at all, but she paid a lot of attention to detail and knew how to take these parts of their stories and their mannerisms and their voices and bring that into her performance. So she actually did such a wonderful job. So don't feel like if your resume is blank in terms of performance stuff that you're totally not cut out for, because you very well could be. So keep that in mind, and just keep trying. Sometimes people are overstaffed. Sometimes it comes and goes. It's not a consistent business. You have busy seasons. You have other seasons that aren't as busy. So keep trying, but it's definitely worth a shot. And I would say just keep a good outlook, be upfront, and be honest, be a good communicator, because so much of this job relies on being on time, getting to certain places in different cities at certain times. So make sure to be a good communicator and honest, and you should be all set. So that's it. If you have more questions, comment them below, and maybe I can do a second one, but for now these are it. So I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching.